Some political scientists believe that when one superpower collapses, another must take its place, so as to maintain a balance of power. Since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the United States has generally been considered the world's only real hyperpower. The staggering rise of China has become one of the most prominent stories of the 21st century. Some analysts are certain that the Asian giant is well on its way to leaving its developing status behind, and will pass the US as a global power in coming decades, while others maintain the US will stay in front for years to come. In 2020, UBS, a Swiss multinational investment bank and financial services companies survey found that 57% of global investors predicted that China would replace the US as the world's biggest superpower by 2030. The basic components of superpower stature may be measured along four axes of power: military, economic, political, and cultural. A superpower has superior military and economic, diplomatic and cultural influence. If power were solely measured in military terms, there is no question the US is the only military superpower. And while China is still a distant second in terms of military spending, roughly $261 billion versus America's $732 billion, that's a staggering $471 billion difference. But it's a meteoric rise as a developing country to one of the biggest contributors to world economics, its growing diplomatic push, as well as its advances with technology and artificial intelligence, have all called into question the lack of definition in calling the US the world's only superpower. A superpower needs to be the dominant power, not just in military, but politically and economically. And the US is clearly not economically. In fact, the current conflict with China demonstrates this. In March 2020, the US debt to China was $1.08 trillion. That's more than 15% of the $6.8 trillion in treasury bill, notes, and bonds held by foreign countries. China has the second greatest amount of US debt held by a foreign country. Japan tops the list, owning $1.27 trillion. China's economy did not overtake US by 2020, as had been projected by many. Nevertheless, its economy continues to grow faster than that of the US, and in near future, China is likely to overtake. But what about in other areas? History accelerates in crises. This pandemic may not itself transform the world, but it can accelerate changes already underway. Rule-based international order that has been in place since the end of World War II has been upended by Mr. Trump, who has pulled out of treaties, denigrated allies, and started trade wars since his election. His behavior is speeding up the pace at which the American power erodes. As other nations begin to rise and play an important role, the role of the US erodes on the global stage. The Lowy Institute recently released Asia Power Index also showed a shrinking power differential between the US and China, in part due to the Trump administration's policies. In fact, The report ranked Washington behind Beijing and Tokyo for diplomatic influence in Asia, partially due to contradictions between the United States and other nations. However, Mr. Trump told Fox News' Steve Hilton last month that he was very happy with the trade war with China, and that Beijing wouldn't replace the US as the world's superpower while he is in office. A nation risks losing its position as dominance when its leadership loses sight of the fact. The United States has the richest and most secure land on the planet, the most productive population, and a political system that, though far from perfect, is better at spurring entrepreneurship and innovation than the other corrupt regimes of China or Russia. It is human nature to look into the future. Even in the middle of the most all-consuming crises, there is room to consider what might come after. Which country is going to be the next superpower? The question still remains speculative. The record of such predictions has admittedly not been perfect. For example, in the 1980s, some commentators thought Japan would become a superpower due to its large GDP and high economic growth at the time. However, Japan's economy crashed in 1991, creating a long period of economic slump in the country, which has become known as the lost years. Do you think America will always remain as a superpower? Let us know in the comment. And as always, thanks for watching.